The market of chains, the galaxy, was cruel. And nowhere was that cruelty clearer than in the slave market of Zorath Prime. The market stretched for miles, a city made only for selling lives. Tall spires of black metal cast long shadows over cages. Stacked like towers, voices echoed harsh and greedy, calling out numbers, offers, and laughter. Everywhere the sound of chains clinking filled the air. Merchants from dozens of species gathered, their eyes hungry for profit. They moved like vultures, circling cages and pointing at bodies inside. Some wanted strong workers, others wanted fighters, and some only wanted trophies. The weak were mocked, the strong were praised, and all were given a price. The smell of fear hung heavy, mixing with the stink of alien spices and oil. The slaves sat inside iron bars, eyes hollow, spirits broken. Some had scaled skin, some had fur, some had metal fused into their bones. They came from 100 different worlds, but here they were the same. Property. The auctioneer shouted names and numbers, raising his arms high. Each sale ended with a clap of approval, each soul dragged away by new masters. One by one, cages opened. One by one, the captives were sold. No voice was raised in protest, for no one dared. The market was law, and the law was simple. If you could not buy, you had no power. The crowd roared with every deal, amused by the suffering. And then, as the day went on, there was only one cage left. In that cage sat a figure so small, so thin, that even the flies ignored it. Its skin was pale and cracked, its eyes dull with years of pain. It did not lift its head. It did, not even hope. It had been called worthless many times, and now it believed it. The auctioneer pointed at the cage with a sneer. Final lot, he barked. Damaged goods, unfit for labor, unfit for battle, worthless. The crowd laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. No one raised a hand, no one made an offer. Even the lowest bidders turned away, shaking their heads. The alien guards whispered, wondering what to do. Should we leave it for scraps? One asked. Throw it to the pits, another replied. Let the beasts have it. The slave inside did not flinch. It only stared at the ground. It had no tears left to cry, no dreams left to chase. The sun dipped lower, and the market began to close. Merchants counted their profits. Buyers led their new slaves away. The air grew quiet, but one cage remained closed. The forgotten one, the worthless one, the last that no one wanted. Its chains rattled softly as it moved to the corner. Hiding from the light for hours it sat alone. It remembered voices from the past, mocking and cruel. You are nothing, they had said. Less than nothing. Those words carved deep wounds in its heart, wounds deeper than any whip. It wished only for silence, for the end of waiting, but destiny was not done with the market of chains. As the crowd thinned, a new sound rose. Boots against stone, firm and steady, a small group entered, their steps unhurried, their eyes calm. They were not like the others, their faces strange and unfamiliar to this place. The auctioneer frowned, irritated. You come late, he snapped. The best stock is gone. Only scraps remain. But the newcomers did not rush, they did not bow or laugh. They walked with quiet strength, their eyes moving from cage to cage. The guards muttered, watching closely, sensing something unusual. The last slave lifted its head for the first time that day. Its tired eyes caught sight of the strangers. They looked different from the others, less cold, less cruel. Something in their gaze made the slave's heart beat faster. It did not understand why, but it could not look away. The auctioneer waved dismissively at the final cage. Worthless, he said again, not worth a single coin. The crowd, what was left of it, laughed once more, but the newcomers did not laugh. They stopped, standing still before the cage. The market grew quieter, curious eyes watching. Why? Were these strangers wasting time? Why did they even bother to look at the weakest of all? The slave trembled, expecting mockery, waiting for more cruelty. But instead silence stretched, heavy and tense. The auctioneer tapped his staff impatiently. Well, speak your offer or move on. The strangers did not answer at once. They leaned closer, studying the broken figure, and then one of them whispered something the others could not hear. The slave blinked, confused. For the first time in countless days, it felt seen. The crowd shifted, murmuring. A strange energy filled the air. The auctioneer scowled, ready to dismiss them, but just as he raised his staff, the leader of the newcomers finally spoke. His voice was clear, steady, unlike the greedy shouts of others. "We will take this one," he said. The market froze in shock. Laughter burst out, harsh and mocking. "Humans are fools," the aliens jeered, yet the deal was made. The cage was opened and chains rattled loose. The worthless one stumbled forward, uncertain and afraid. But a hand reached out, steady and firm. A hand that lifted instead of striking. The slave did not understand, not yet. But in that moment, hope flickered like a spark in the dark. The market of chains had seen 1,000 cruel trades, but never one like this. And in the silence that followed, a story began that the galaxy would never forget. The worthless, alone. The market was empty now, the noise of the day fading into silence. The last voices had left. The merchants counted their coins, and the cages stood half open and hollow. But in the far corner of the market, a single cage still rattled faintly in the wind. It was the cage of the one called worthless, the one nobody had wanted, the one that no buyer had claimed. The guards had left it locked, not caring if the being inside lived or died. They joked, as they walked away. "Let the rats finish it," one sneered, "or maybe the scavengers will take it by dawn." The auctioneer waved his hand without a second thought. "Trash belongs with trash," he muttered as he vanished into the shadows. Soon the great market that had roared with life was a graveyard of silence, broken only by the hum of dim lights above. Inside the cage, the worthless one sat hunched and still. Its body was weak, its skin cracked, its bones sharp beneath thin flesh. But the greatest weight was not the chains around its wrists. It was the memory of countless voices that had told it again and again, "You are nothing. You are weak. You are not worth the air you breathe." The words rang louder than the laughter of the crowd. They lived inside its mind, carved deep into the soul like scars that would never heal. The creature had believed them once. It believed them still. It sat with its head bowed, waiting for the end, waiting for the darkness that would finally take it. Yet fate was stubborn. The moment stretched on, but death did not come. Instead, footsteps echoed again in the market, soft but steady. The worthless one lifted its head slightly, expecting guards or scavengers, but what it saw was strange. A small group of figures walked slowly through the rows of cages, their movements calm, their eyes searching. The worthless one blinked in confusion, for these were not the same merchants, not the same cruel faces. Their clothing was plain but strong, their eyes clear, their steps without greed or mockery. They were human, though the worthless one did not know the word. Not yet. It only knew they looked at cages differently. Where others saw property, they saw something else, something the creature could not understand. They stopped at the final cage, the cage no one wanted. The worthless one trembled, expecting more laughter, expecting harsh words, but instead, silence fell. The humans looked closely, and their eyes did not shine with hunger or profit. One of them whispered softly, almost gently, words the creature could not hear but could feel. The auctioneer scoffed from a distance. Worthless, a mistake, not worth a coin. But the leader of the humans stepped forward, his voice steady. "We will take this one." The crowd that remained burst into laughter. "Fools, humans are fools, paying for garbage." But the humans did not answer. They paid, and the cage was opened. Chains fell with a heavy clang. The worthless one stumbled out, weak legs barely holding. It braced itself for a blow, for cruelty, for pain, but instead, a hand reached forward, steady, warm, pulling it up from the ground. The touch was strange, almost frightening, for it was the first touch without violence in years. The guards laughed again. "Keep your trash, humans. It will die before the day is done." But the humans did not let go. They guided the worthless one gently, step by step, away from the market of chains. For the first time, the creature felt the cool night air without bars between. It did not understand freedom, but something inside stirred. A flicker it thought was long dead. Hours passed as they walked, the market shrinking behind them. The humans spoke in low voices, their words soft, their tone unlike anything the worthless one had known. It could not understand the language, but it felt the rhythm. There was no mockery, no cruelty, only calm strength. The worthless one tried to listen, but exhaustion dragged its body down. The humans gave it water, cool and clean. The liquid burned its dry throat, but it drank greedily. Then they gave food, soft and warm, not the scraps it had once licked from the dirt. Tears threatened its eyes, but it blinked them away, too afraid to believe this was real. Surely it was a trick. Surely pain would follow. That night they camped under the open stars. The worthless one lay close to the fire, too weak to move. It watched as the humans spoke and laughed quietly among themselves. Not once did they look at it with disgust. Not once did they raise their hands in cruelty. The stars above seemed endless, and for the first time, the creature wondered if its story was not yet over. Sleep came slowly, heavy but uncertain. Dreams returned. Dreams it had not allowed itself in years. Dreams of a place where it was not mocked, not beaten, not sold. Dreams of belonging, of being seen. When it woke, the fire was low, but one human sat nearby, keeping watch, their eyes gentle but alert. The worthless one did not speak, for it had no words, but inside a question grew. Why had these strangers taken it? Why had they bought what others had thrown away? Why had they chosen the worthless when the galaxy had already judged it as nothing? It tried to understand, but no answer came. Only the steady warmth of the fire and the steady breath of the humans. For the first time in countless nights, the worthless one was not cold, not alone. Fear still lingered. Doubt still whispered. But beneath it all, a seed had been planted. A seed called hope. Small and fragile, but alive. And that hope would change everything, though the creature could not yet see it. The market of chains had called it worthless. The galaxy had declared it unfit to live. But humanity had seen something else. Something hidden. Something waiting. The worthless one did not yet believe, but the humans did. And their belief would become the fire that lit a path no slave had ever walked before. The arrival of the humans, the morning sun rose over the broken towers of Zorath Prime. Its red light fell across the empty slave market, painting the streets with shadows. Merchants had already left with their profits, their ships carrying slaves to far-off worlds where chains waited for them. But behind the dust and silence, whispers began to spread. Whispers about the strange choice made the night before. They bought the worthless one. Voices murmured in disbelief. Humans, of all creatures, paid for trash. Another hissed. The rumor spread from stall to stall, from tavern to tavern, until it became the story of the city. Some laughed, some shook their heads, and some wondered if humanity was simply mad. But no one truly understood, for no one had ever seen a species behave like that. Far from the city, in a quiet clearing, beneath twisted alien trees, the humans prepared their camp. The worthless one sat near the fire, its body weak but no longer starving. The chains had been removed, the bruises still ached, but it could feel something different. It did not yet know the word, but the feeling was freedom. Though its mind doubted, though its heart feared, still something new stirred inside. The humans moved with strange order, each task done with care. One gathered water, another prepared food, while two others checked strange devices that glowed with light. They were not like the aliens of the market who barked and pushed and laughed at pain. These strangers spoke to one another with respect, their voices calm, their eyes steady. They treated even the smallest actions with meaning. The worthless one watched, trying to understand. Why had they chosen it? Why had they looked at the broken body and seen something worth saving? It shook its head, unable to believe. All its life it had been told it was nothing. Yet here it was, sitting by a fire, with those who treated it as if it mattered. When the leader of the humans approached, the worthless one flinched. It expected a blow, a command, or another cruel laugh. But instead, the leader crouched low, holding out a small piece of fruit. The creature hesitated, its hands trembling. Slowly it reached forward, expecting the gift to be snatched away, but the fruit remained. The leader nodded once as if to say, "Take, it is yours." The worthless one bit into the food, its throat burning with hunger. Juice ran down its chin, and for the first time in many years it tasted sweetness. The humans did not laugh, they only watched quietly as though proud. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the morning air. The humans spoke softly among themselves, words the slave could not understand. But their voices were not cruel, not sharp, not filled with greed. Instead, their tone was warm, calm, and almost protective. The creature tilted its head, confused by every sound, every gesture. Later, as the day stretched, one of the humans brought out a strange box. He pressed buttons and glowing lights danced in the air. Pictures appeared, moving like water, showing worlds the slave had never seen. Blue oceans, green fields, cities filled with towers of glass and light. The worthless one stared in wonder, its heart pounding with awe. The human turned the box toward the creature, pointing to the images. Then he pointed at the sky above, as if to say, "This is where we come from." The creature did not understand all, but it felt the meaning. The humans were showing it their home, not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as a gift. The galaxy had called it worthless, yet here, it was being shown a world of beauty. Still doubt lived inside. The worthless one lowered its head, whispering words it barely had strength to speak. Why me?" Its voice cracked, unused to kindness, unused to asking. The humans could not understand its language, but they saw its tears. The leader placed a hand on its shoulder, steady and firm. He spoke softly in human tongue, words the creature could not know but could feel. "You are not worthless." The meaning was clear in his eyes, in his voice, in his touch, and for the first time, the creature began to believe that maybe it was true. That night, the humans made their camp again. The stars above burned bright, endless and cold. But near the fire there was warmth. The worthless one lay on soft cloth, not the hard floor of a cage. Its wounds were cleaned, its body wrapped in warmth. It closed its eyes, not in fear, but in the fragile peace of rest. Dreams came again, but not of chains. Dreams of walking among the humans, not as a slave, not as property, but as something else. Dreams of a voice calling it more than nothing. Dreams of belonging. When it woke, the humans were still there, keeping watch, guarding as if it mattered. The galaxy had laughed at humanity for buying what no one wanted, but in that laughter was fear, though they did not yet see it. For humanity had shown something dangerous, something the empires did not understand. They had shown that worth was not measured in strength or price, but in choice, and that choice to value the worthless would echo across the stars. The worthless one could not yet know, but its life had already changed the course of history. In the eyes of humans it was not trash, not broken, not nothing. In their eyes it was alive, and that was enough. And from that simple truth, a story would rise that would shake the galaxy itself. The choice that shocks the galaxy, the market of chains had ended, but the echo of that final trade refused to fade. Whispers slithered through the alleys of Zorath Prime, across docking bays and into the taverns where merchants drank away their profits. "They bought it," one voice hissed. "The worthless one. Humans paid coin for trash." Another, sneered, laughter followed, but behind the laughter was unease. No species had ever done such a thing. The strong were sold, the useful were sold, but the broken were left to rot. That was the law of the market, the unspoken rule followed by every empire. To take what had no value was seen as foolishness, weakness, madness, and yet the humans had done it without hesitation. By the next day, the rumor had grown into a story. By the second day, the story had become a question, and by the third, The question spread like fire across the trade routes of the galaxy. Why did humanity buy what all others had left behind? The worthless one did not know any of this. It sat by the fire with the humans, still weak but breathing freer than ever before. Food filled its stomach, water eased its thirst, and the soft murmur of human voices wrapped around it like a shield. It was not healed, but it was no longer dying, and that was enough for now. But in the cities of Zorath Prime, alien lords debated, what does it mean? One demanded, his scaled fists slamming against a table. Nothing, another scoffed. It is only human sentiment. They are new to the markets. They do not yet understand the laws. Yet doubt flickered in their eyes, for even the smallest act can shake the tallest towers. Meanwhile, the guards of the market muttered to themselves. They will regret it, one said. The thing will die in their care, and their money will be wasted. But when no word of its death came, their voices grew quieter. Some began to wonder if perhaps they had misjudged, if perhaps the humans saw something others could not. The humans, however, did not speak of worth or value. They simply cared for the creature as they would care for one of their own. They cleaned its wounds, fed it, taught it to walk again. Where others saw a burden, they saw a life. And in that choice lay the seed of something powerful. When the humans returned to the market for supplies, the reaction was immediate. Merchants stopped to stare, whispering behind clawed hands and forked tongues. Some laughed aloud, calling them collectors of trash and sentimental fools. But others watched more closely, eyes narrowed with curiosity. Why would a species waste coin in such a way? What secret did they know? The leader of the humans ignored the laughter, walking with calm steps. When asked why he had purchased the worthless one, he only answered with a few simple words. Because it was alive. The market fell into silence at such a response. No one had ever spoken of life in that way before, not in the language of the market. The worthless one clung close to its human protectors, trembling as eyes followed it. It expected stones, whips, or cruel jokes, but none came. The aliens were too shocked, too unsettled by what they had witnessed, and in that silence, the humans stood taller, not with pride, but with quiet certainty. News spread beyond Zorath Prime, carried by traders who delighted in gossip. On distant worlds, alien leaders scoffed when they heard the tale. Humans are weak, they said. Foolish, soft. But in private, some asked questions they dared not voice aloud. If they see value in the worthless, what will they see in the rest of us? For power in the galaxy was built on chains, chains of iron, chains of fear, chains of profit. And humanity, by buying the one left behind, had placed a crack in those chains. Small, almost invisible, but growing with every retelling of the story. The worthless one did not understand any of this. It only knew that the humans treated it with kindness. They gave it warmth when it shivered, food when it hungered, and rest when it faltered. Each act, simple and small, began to rebuild what had been broken. And though it still called itself worthless, the humans never did. One evening, as the campfire burned low, the creature whispered again, "Why me?" It did not expect an answer, for no one had ever answered before. But the leader of the humans looked at it with steady eyes, and he said words simple but unshakable, "Because you deserve to live." The creature trembled, unable to speak. No one had ever said such a thing, not once in all its years. It felt as though a mountain had been lifted from its chest. The firelight glowed in its eyes, and for the first time it dared to hope. In that moment, the choice of humanity was no longer just an act of compassion. It became a declaration. One the galaxy could not ignore. The slavers would laugh, but their laughter hid unease. The merchants would sneer, but their sneers hid doubt. And the empires would whisper, wondering what kind of species dared to break the unwritten laws of value. The worthless one slept that night under the stars. It dreamed not of cages but of open skies. It dreamed of walking unchained, of speaking without fear, and though it did not yet understand, it had become a symbol, a living question that no alien could answer. Why did humanity see worth where none existed? Why did they choose compassion over profit, kindness over strength, life over law. The galaxy had no answers, but the humans did not need to explain, for their actions spoke louder than words, and so the choice that shocked the galaxy was made, not with weapons, not with power, but with simple hands, hands that lifted instead of striking, hands that healed instead of chaining. The galaxy laughed, but the laughter was hollow, for deep inside they feared what might happen if more slaves, more broken ones began to believe they too had worth, a new beginning. The forest was quiet, the stars overhead bright as silver. The campfire burned low, glowing softly in the night. The worthless one sat near it, wrapped in a blanket the humans had given. Its body still trembled with weakness, yet warmth spread through its bones. For the first time in countless seasons, it did not feel the bite of cold. The humans moved around the camp with steady rhythm. One tended the fire, another prepared simple food, while two more kept watch beyond the trees. They worked without shouting, without cruelty, without fear. Their movements were smooth like water flowing from a hidden spring. The worthless one watched in silence, its hollow eyes slowly filling with wonder. It remembered the market, the laughter of merchants, the jeers of guards. It remembered the word, worthless, shouted again and again. But here, in the quiet of the night, those voices seemed faint. Every action of the humans was different. Every look was strange. They spoke softly, they smiled gently, and they touched without harm. When food was ready, they offered it first to the creature. The slave blinked in confusion, unused to being given anything. It waited for the food to be snatched away, but no hand came. Instead, the humans nodded for it to eat. And so it did. Slowly at first, then hungrily, until its stomach ached with fullness it had not known in years. Afterwards, the humans shared water, clear and cool. The creature drank until its throat no longer burned. It felt its strength return, small but real. The humans did not mock, did not count how much it drank. They simply let it live, and that was enough to shake the foundations of its world. The worthless one tried to understand. Why had they chosen it? Why had they spent coin on what no one wanted? It whispered again, words broken and faint. Why me? But the humans only smiled softly, as though the answer was too simple to need words. The days passed, each one changing the creature little by little. Its wounds healed, its steps grew steadier, its eyes lifted higher. The chains no longer cut its skin, the hunger no longer ruled its thoughts. At night, it dreamed of things it had never allowed itself to dream before, dreams of walking freely, dreams of being more than nothing. One evening, as the stars burned above, the humans brought out their glowing box again. Images flickered in the air, oceans that stretched forever, forests of green, mountains crowned with snow. The worthless one gasped softly, its chest tightening. It had never seen such beauty, never imagined such worlds could exist. It looked at the humans with wide eyes, as though begging for the truth. The leader pointed at the images, then at the sky. This is home, his voice said in human tongue. The creature could not understand the words, but the meaning reached its heart. The humans were not only showing their world, they were sharing it, as if to say, you may see it too, for you are not worthless to us. The creature trembled, overwhelmed. Tears it had buried deep inside now spilled freely. No one had ever shown it beauty. No one had ever shared anything except pain. And here were humans, giving without demand, offering without chains. It whispered again, broken but desperate. Why? The leader crouched low, his eyes steady. You are alive, he said slowly, clearly, as if trying to make the words understood. And though the creature did not know the language, it felt the truth. Not worthless, not trash, not nothing. Alive. The word burned in its heart, brighter than fire, stronger than chains as the days became weeks. The worthless one changed. Its steps grew firm, its back no longer bent with shame. It learned to lift its head, to meet the eyes of others without fear. It even tried to speak, fumbling, broken sounds, but the humans encouraged it. They taught, with patience, guiding every word, every step. The galaxy did not ignore these changes. Rumors spread further than the humans knew, across starports and markets, across ships and trade routes. The tale of the worthless one grew. Some mocked, calling humans sentimental fools, but others whispered with unease, for no other species had ever done such a thing. On distant worlds, slaves heard the story. They whispered it in chains, in cages, in darkness. If humans can see worth in the worthless, perhaps they will see worth in us too. And in that whisper, hope began to bloom like fire hidden in ash, small, fragile, but dangerous to the empires that thrived on despair. The slavers scoffed, but fear crept into their eyes. What if this spreads? One growled, what if others believe they are more than property? But another snapped back, no, it is nothing, only one creature, only one human mistake. Yet the fear did not fade, for deep inside, they knew one act of compassion can change more than 1,000 weapons. The worthless one did not yet see itself as a symbol. It only knew that its life was no longer filled with hunger, no longer bound in chains. It learned to laugh quietly, to walk without falling, to dream without fear. Every kindness, every small moment, stitched its broken spirit back together, and though doubt still whispered, hope grew louder each day. One night, as the humans rested, the creature looked at the stars. It thought of the market, the cage, the word worthless, and then it thought of the humans, their eyes, their hands, their voices. A strange warmth filled its chest, a strength it had never felt before. It whispered to itself, maybe I am more. It did not know what the future held, but it knew this was a beginning, a new path, a new life. The galaxy had laughed, the slavers had mocked, the empires had doubted, but humanity had chosen differently. And that choice was already reshaping the fate of one creature, and soon perhaps the fate of all. The worthless one lay down to sleep, the fire glowing gently beside it. It closed its eyes not in despair but in fragile peace. And as dreams carried it into the night, one truth remained. This was not the end. This was only the beginning. Transformation. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks began to weave themselves into something larger. What began as survival was slowly becoming life. The worthless one no longer stumbled at every step, no longer flinched at every sound. Under the care of the humans, its body grew stronger. Its wounds faded into scars. But more than the body, the heart began to change. Once it had lowered its head in shame, now it began to lift its eyes. Once it had hidden its hands, now it reached out, clumsy but unafraid. It had been called worthless 1,000 times. Yet each day with the humans proved otherwise. Every act of kindness stitched a broken piece together. Every word of patience became a stone in a foundation that was slowly rising. The humans did not rush. They did not demand. They gave the creature tasks, small at first, carrying water, gathering wood, helping stir the pot by the fire. Each task was met with quiet encouragement. When it failed, they did not strike. They did not curse, they only helped again. The creature learned that mistakes were not death but steps toward strength. At night, under the wide sky, the humans taught it words. Slowly, carefully, they pointed at objects, speaking the sounds. The creature repeated, its tongue unsure, its voice rough, but each word was met with nods of approval. It learned water, food, friend, and at last, it learned human. When it tried to say the word, its chest swelled with something new, something that almost felt like pride. The human smiled when it laughed for the first time. The sound was broken, thin, almost strange, but it was laughter nonetheless, and with that laughter, a chain unseen snapped in its heart. It was no longer the thing left behind in the cage. It was becoming something else, though it did not yet know the name. Far away, the galaxy still whispered. Merchants told the story again and again, often with mockery, but beneath their laughter was unease. For rumors had reached even the darkest slaveholds, that a worthless one had been chosen, that it had been fed, healed, and even taught. Slaves chained in darkness repeated the story, quietly at first, then louder. If the humans could see worth in one, maybe they can see worth in all. The slavers grew restless. What if the others start to believe? One snarled, "Hope is more dangerous than rebellion." Another spat, "It is a lie, a human trick, nothing more." But even as they spoke, fear glimmered in their eyes, for no empire, no lord of chains, could control the spread of hope once it had taken root. Back in the forest, the worthless one began to dream not of cages but of futures. It dreamed of walking freely beside the humans, not as a slave, but as something greater. It dreamed of standing tall, of speaking without trembling, of being seen without shame. These dreams filled its nights, and when it woke, it tried to take small steps toward them. Each day, those steps grew steadier. One morning, as the humans prepared to move camp, they handed the creature a tool, a simple blade, small but sharp. At first it froze, hands trembling, for a blade had always meant pain, but the humans placed it gently in its grasp, guiding its hands to cut rope, to shape wood. The creature realized for the first time that a tool did not only destroy, it could build. With every lesson it grew. With every day it shed the skin of worthlessness. It was no longer the thing mocked and forgotten. It was becoming, piece by piece, something new. It began to think, maybe even believe, that it was not worthless at all. The humans saw this change and did not speak of it aloud. They only continued, to guide, to teach, to protect. But in their eyes was quiet pride, for they knew what the galaxy refused to see. That strength is not born from chains, but from compassion. That life is not measured by value in the market, but by the spark within. One night, while the fire burned low, the creature sat with the leader of the humans. It pointed at its chest, then at the sky, then whispered halting, broken words, alive." The leader smiled, nodding slowly. "Yes," he said, his voice warm, "you are alive." Those words were more powerful than any chain, more powerful than any whip. The creature felt something rise inside, something fierce, something unbreakable. It was not the old self, not the worthless one the market had mocked. It was something greater, born anew in fire and kindness. And in that moment, it swore silently to itself. Never again would it believe the lies of the past. Far beyond the forest, the story reached. Even further, on warships and stations, alien captains mocked, "Humans are weak." But in their laughter was unease, for they had heard whispers of change. They had heard that one who had been worthless now walked freely, learning, growing, transforming. And they feared what might happen if that transformation spread, for the galaxy ruled by chains knew one truth well. That hope is more dangerous than rebellion. That compassion is more destructive than conquest. That one life lifted up could spark the rise of many more. And the humans, by their simple choice, had lit that spark. The worthless one did not yet understand its place in this greater storm. It only knew it was no longer the broken thing in a cage. It could walk without fear. It could speak words with meaning. It could dream without pain. And in the eyes of the humans, it was not worthless. It was worthy, more worthy than the galaxy could ever admit. By the time the moon rose high above the camp, the transformation was clear. The creature that once cowered in chains now sat upright, firelight in its eyes. It still bore scars, but the scars no longer defined it. It still carried fear, but fear no longer ruled it. It was becoming something new, something dangerous to the order of chains. And so the night closed with quiet, firelight with steady breath. With the sound of life reborn, the humans slept in peace. But the galaxy beyond stirred uneasily, for one act of compassion had begun to ripple outward. One worthless life was no longer worthless. And that truth would shake the stars. Humanity's legacy. The stars stretched endlessly across the black sky, cold and distant. Worlds spun in silence, ships cut through the void, empires whispered their cruel bargains. But in one small camp, under the glow of fire and moon, a story was unfolding that the galaxy could no longer ignore. The worthless one, once mocked, once caged, once forgotten, sat beside the humans, and its eyes no longer looked at the ground. They looked upward toward the stars not with fear, but with wonder. It had changed, and everyone who saw it knew. The bent body now stood taller. The trembling voice now carried words of life. Scars still covered its skin, but those scars no longer defined it. It had been called worthless 1,000 times, but now it carried a truth greater than any insult. It was alive, and in the eyes of humanity, being alive was enough. The humans did not see a tool. They did not see property. They did not see trash. They saw a life worth protecting, a soul worth saving. And in that vision they had begun to build something dangerous, for the galaxy's empires had been forged on the idea that worth could be measured in strength, price, and power. But humanity had shattered that idea with a single act of compassion. The story spread like fire. From Zorath Prime to the outer colonies, slaves whispered it in the darkness. Soldiers repeated it in hushed tones. Merchants argued about it in taverns. Humans bought the worthless one, they said. And it? Lives. At first it was only rumor, only laughter, but slowly the laughter weakened. For every retelling made the story harder to ignore. On one world, a slave lifted its head and dared to speak. If one life can matter to humans, perhaps mine does too. On another, a guard hesitated before striking, wondering why humanity had chosen differently. On a distant ship, an officer scoffed, yet in his mind the question would not leave. What do they see that we cannot? The worthless one did not know it had become a symbol. It only knew that its life was no longer chains, no longer silence. Each day it walked further. Each day it learned more words. Each day it smiled a little more. The humans gave it no titles, no demands, only space to grow, and in that space it became more than it had ever thought possible. One evening, as the fire burned low, the creature stood before the humans. Its voice was still rough, still halting, but it spoke words with meaning. Not worthless, it said, each sound trembling but proud. The humans nodded, their eyes warm, their faces lit with quiet pride. In that moment, the last chain broke, not from its wrists, but from its soul. The galaxy, however, was restless. Slavers cursed the humans in their councils, calling them dangerous, disruptive, foolish. Merchants feared their markets would weaken if slaves began to hope, and rulers of empires whispered in shadow. What if humanity spreads this madness? What if others rise? But for all their fear, they could not erase the truth, for the truth was not carried in ships or laws. It was carried in whispers, in stories, in the eyes of those who began to believe again. Hope traveled faster than any vessel, sharper than any blade. And in the fire of that hope, the power of chains began to crack. All because one human hand had reached into a cage and lifted the forgotten. The worthless one, reborn in spirit, walked beside the humans now. It helped carry their packs, it shared food by the fire, it learned to laugh without shame. But more than that, it began to dream of a future not only for itself, but for others. Like it, if it could be lifted, why not them? If humanity could see value in one, why not in all? The humans did not speak of revolution. They did not boast of their act. They simply lived as they believed. But their example was louder than any proclamation. It showed the galaxy a new measure of worth, one that no chain could contain, and that truth began to spread beyond control. On Zorath Prime, the auctioneer who had mocked now sat in silence. He remembered the human's calm voice, the steady eyes, the choice that made no sense. He tried to laugh, but the laughter died in his throat, for he too could not stop the question, what if they were right? The worthless one stood at the edge of the forest one morning, staring at the horizon. It remembered the cage, the market, the laughter of cruelty. But those memories no longer crushed it. They became shadows behind a rising sun. Now it walked, with strength, not because it had been made strong, but because it had been seen, valued, believed in. The galaxy would remember that moment, not the sale of thousands, not the laughter of merchants, not the cruelty of chains, but the single act of a species that chose compassion over profit. The single act of buying what was worthless and proving it had worth. That choice was humanity's legacy, and it was a legacy no empire could erase. For legacy is not carved only in stone or written in law. It is carved in lives, in souls, in the fire of those who were once broken but now rise again. The worthless one was no longer worthless. It had become proof, living proof, that humanity was different. And that difference would shake the stars. The humans did not need to declare themselves great. They did not need to shout their strength. They only needed to show kindness. And in that kindness lay a power the galaxy could not match. A power that did not destroy but rebuilt. A power that did not chain but freed. The worthless one looked to the sky and whispered words it had once thought impossible. I'm alive. I have worth. The humans placed a hand on its shoulder, and in that simple touch was a promise that this was only the beginning, a promise that no life, no matter how broken, would ever be worthless again. And so the galaxy turned, restless and uncertain. Empires plotted, merchants feared, slaves hoped. But through it all, the story spread, a story no one could silence. All were sold, but one, and only humanity saw value in the worthless.